Hello, Alexander, colleagues and friends. These are strange times we're in. How are you managing? Some people have taken to online work like ducks to water. Other people, I think, are less confident but are doing it anyway. Some are being forced into it by their pupils, and some are doing it just because they have to. And other people haven't found that confidence and they don't feel they have the skills for online work. Mainly because most of our trainings were purely about teaching hands, and when faced with online work, a lot of teachers don't feel they have the skills to do it. Other teachers, and quite a lot of teachers I think, are taking this time that we've got at the moment to really study anatomy, physiology, to study the science behind the technique, because I think we all know now that we've got to learn our science and our anatomy so that we really can explain our technique, whether to other professionals or to our pupils. I think the modern pupil is a very different creature than the compliant pupil of 30, certainly 50 years ago, who took things on trust. The modern pupil wants to know why they are being asked to do these strange movements that their nervous system tells them are all wrong, and I think they're right to ask for explanations. So I've put a course together to meet all these needs. It's experiential. There'll be a lot of functional anatomy and neuroscience, because if we are to teach pupils online, they need these explanations. They really need to know what's going on, and you need them too, so that you can direct them to do what they need to do to bring about change. There are various key things that we need to know. Firstly, we need to know, how do I free a neck? Because if a pupil comes into our workroom, we feel with our hands to feel what's going on, and then we use our hands to make an adjustment. And now we can't use our hands. So we need the functional anatomy. We need to know how to direct the pupils to bring this about for themselves. But I think there's more as well, because dogs don't go around saying free the neck. Nature has actually imbued animals with a natural mechanism that keeps the neck free. And what is it? And how do we apply it for ourselves? And this we can learn, and learn how to direct pupils accordingly. And the same is true of the fundamental bends, the organising the head to lead and the back to follow and so on. Because we can, and we do need to, teach pupils the functional anatomy behind that, to teach them to observe their own process and how to inhibit and direct. But also, how does a toddler do it? Toddlers don't think about organising their head-neck-back relationship before they go into a beautiful squat. They just do it. And again, we can discover how to cue the nervous system, how to show us, and how to show the pupils the movements that we are evolutionarily designed to make. And this is a very exciting thing to be able to direct pupils to do, and to be able to learn to do ourselves, if you don't already know. But we don't just want to get pupils to be freer, because if a pupil, say, has had a very bad back for a long time, they will also have a very weak back. We need to be bringing different muscles into play, different muscles that they've never maybe experienced in their life before, to build a strong back. And once we understand the real functional anatomy of the lower back particularly, we really can do this, and we can help people build themselves a very strong back. And that leads on to another key question, which is, how on earth do I free a very tight shoulder, for instance, without my hands? If somebody comes in for a lesson, they've got a tight shoulder that maybe has been tight for 20 years or more, we would take hold of them and we'd give that shoulder a jolly good pull. We can't do that over the internet. But Alexander didn't have anyone to give him those pulls. He learnt early on how to do those pulls for himself. He must have done. And I think he used them all his life. And I think they were still being taught in the very first training course, and we still have some of them by name, such as pull to the elbow. And we are using that pull to the elbow when we pull a pupil's shoulder for them. Pupils love learning how to do this for themselves, that they can go home and work on their own really tight muscles at home. It really speeds the process if they're helping the work as well. And by goodness, we could do with a pull to the elbow ourselves for the moment. There's nobody to work on us at the moment either. Isn't this a bit doing, I hear you cry? Well, I don't think so, because as long as you know the functional anatomy, so that you know exactly precisely the anatomy you're bringing about, and also you use integrative thinking, then you can actually apply quite a lot of force and apply it correctly. If any of you have experienced the first generation hands, particularly those very early teachers, they had incredibly strong hands and incredibly strong bodies. I think we need to wake up our tone, wake up the strength in our system in this integrated way more than we know. And this again is very exciting to be able to teach you, to be able to learn. We also have a deeper question, which is, how do we bring a pupil to quiet without our hands? Pupils arrive into our lesson room agitated from whatever the day has thrown at them. And what do? We use our hands to calm them down. And now we don't have the hands. And again, there are cues you can use for the nervous system, using vision, using breathing, using other methods, how to bring the pupil to quiet. Because unless the pupil comes to quiet, they won't come present to themselves to observe. They won't come present to you to actually hear what you're saying. And neither will they feel safe in order to be able to let their bodies perform movements that are unfamiliar to them. This takes a lot of safety in the nervous system. So this leads on to another question, which is, how on earth can I do this over the internet? Because doesn't online working feel cold and remote? Well, no, because one can learn to use one's presence in a different way, so that the pupil experiences you as present in the room with them. And then they feel safe, because they feel you there with them. And there's another part to this magic, which is that you then feel that they are in the room with you. And then somehow you just know what's going on in them. You know whether they're getting it, you know where they're still tight, and you can then direct them accordingly. And this process that sounds magic is now being called resonance. And psychotherapists are talking about it. How did I learn this different stuff? Well, as I say, I did a training which was just about hands-on, and I'd had 3 years lessons before that, which also were just hands-on, and nobody ever taught me how to work on myself. And so when I finished my training in 1989 and began to build a practice, within 6 months my use had really fallen apart and I was a mess. And that's when I went to Miss Goldie. And many of you will have heard of her. She trained with Alexander. She took her first lessons back in 1927, so she was one of his early teachers, predating the first training course. And her work was so different to anything I'd ever experienced before. It was so strong, so quiet, so empowering, and a lot of people have written who worked with her about the quietness that she brought about, how she taught them to think. The emphasis she taught on constructive conscious control. Nobody's really written about the different biomechanics. She seemed to have a whole different model of the body, and she was doing different things. So I've been on a 30-year journey to explore all this and to understand it. And it took me to a lot of different teachers, of course, but it's also taken me into functional anatomy and biomechanics and science, and to begin to understand what's going on. And the science and these new understandings, they've only been there in the last decade or two. They've only been recently available, that we can actually really start to put a picture together of how it works. So Goldie taught me to work on myself, because that's what I really needed to learn from her. And from there, naturally, I taught my pupils to work on themselves. And then, of course, naturally I took hands off and got them working on themselves across the other side of the room. That then led to groups, and that led easily to working online. And so I know this stuff works. Once you understand the functional anatomy, once you understand how the nervous system works, you really can learn over video how to bring about very different movements and muscle interactions and muscle engagements for yourself without hands-on. I've tested this stuff with family and friends who've never encountered anything in the technique, and it works with them. So this course, you can even learn breathing online, because I would have thought with breathing, of all things, you really need to be feeling into the body to know what's going on, but you don't. Once you again can direct the functional anatomy of it and the nervous system of it, and you can resonate to feel what's going on inside, whether somebody's getting it or not, you can teach breathing. You can teach anything this way. You can teach voice work, singing, anything at all. This is the original Alexander technique, repackaged, if you like, for the 21st century to meet the needs of the modern pupil, with the understandings they need, the explanations they need. It's exciting work, it's fantastic work, it empowers the pupil. Pupils, by and large, love it, because they come away from a lesson going, yes, I know what I'm doing and I can work on it at home. And it's great for teachers too, to work on themselves, to really develop new skills as well. So this is an action-packed course. It's hugely experiential. It's intense. You'll be exploring it straight away with other teachers and hopefully on pupils, if you have pupils at the moment. And I'm excited to be sharing it with you. I do hope you'll join us.